Hi, this is Amber Hall. This screencast is to provide a demonstration of how we use Jupyter for standards-based grading and also for the 4-point scale. Before we dig into Jupyter, there's 3 things I'm going to demonstrate: how to set up standards in Jupyter, how to use standards in the gradebook, and then how the 4-point scale is used. First thing I want to mention is it's probably best to consider using standards in Jupyter that are separated by semester. That means that your list of standards isn't as long in your grade book for every single marking period. Let's take a look at how that looks in Jupyter. When we look in Jupyter, we go to the standards, we see that there's all of the courses in our district that have standards associated with them. So you have to make sure that the standards are connected by course. That's why some chemistry teachers who piloted standards-based grading, all chemistry teachers see these standards, even those who don't use the standards. So you can see they're separated by standard. And when we click open, these are the essential standards that our chemistry teachers needed to be entered for semester 1. You'll note that they have an NA category, not applicable. Sometimes some courses have an other category, and that's for if you have an assignment that isn't quite related to the standards that you have come up with. So it's nice to have that just in case. You might be wondering, well, how is label different from objective? It isn't in this case. In some courses, though, label is the abbreviation. For example, in geometry, teachers decided, well, I'd like this abbreviated in my grade book. It's easier to read. So for example, you can see that like quadrilaterals, regular polygons, irregular polygons, midsegment are all just polygons. So they use that as abbreviation. So that's how standards are set up in Jupyter. Stephanie does that for us. Once you identify your priority standards, this is how it would look. And again, it's correlated by course. How are standards used in Jupyter? I'm going to show you a slide with that information because I didn't want to show actual student grades and I couldn't figure out how to open up Jupyter without showing student grades. But when you open up Jupyter and you go to enter an assignment, you usually enter the assignment here with the due date, select points, grades, or percents, summative, how much weight you want to give the assignment. Down here, once your course is associated with standards, they'll be listed right here for whatever marking period you're in. And what you do is you just simply click on the standard that's associated with that assignment. You can click on more than one. Some teachers, I've seen this before, and this is truly standards-based grading. Instead of entering in assignments like page whatever, worksheet whatever, activity whatever, they enter the actual standard. For example, in chemistry, A1, then click on A1. Next assignment, A2, click on A2. Then in their grade book, what they do is they have an assessment over each of those standards, and they enter in the grades as appropriate. But that allows the opportunity if students retake an assessment for that standard, they just simply change the grade. So a couple different ways to use standards in your grade book. Next thing I'm going to show you is how to set up the 4-point scale in Jupyter. That has been explored at length this year. We've had about 4 different ways of setting up the 4-point scale. And we finally found one that we think is the best way, and we actually found it probably midway through this year. So we're going to be setting up Jupyter a little bit differently in courses that are using the 4-point scale moving forward. First of all, this is the language, the descriptors that we decided on as a staff or as a grading committee, plus with a lot of input. And this is very similar to what our high school science department uses. But when you set up the 4-point scale in Jupyter, again, I'm going to show you using a demo gradebook. Let's see. So this summarizes how we found, or the best way to use 4-point scale. In Jupyter, typically we would select the A, B, C, D, F scale and set our percents accordingly. That's our traditional district scale. But now if you're using the 4-point scale, you want to select 4, 3, 2, 1 plus or minus, and that'll give you 4, 4 minus, 3 plus, 3, 3 minus, and so forth. Change those to an A, A minus, B plus, and so forth. Enter the descriptors that match what I just showed you right here: advanced, proficient, developing, beginning, not enough evidence. And what this does is we can still use letter grades, which is important, especially at the high school for transcripts, but yet the math behind the 4-point scale, which eliminates that severe downward pull of a 0. So this would be the best setup. What that then allows you to do is when you go to grades and you enter in an assignment, you enter in your assignment title, so forth, points possible, then you can specify what's an A, B, C, D, or E. What's nice about this is that if, for example, you decide that a 3 or a 4 is an A for a student, then you just enter that. 3 and above is an A, so that's the minimum value. Maybe there isn't a B, so then you would enter in 2 as a C, and so forth. Or you could, for some assignments, say 4 is a A, 3 is a B, and so forth. That also gives you the flexibility if you're not using a 4-point, but for some reason you are using maybe just sheer grades. Then you can do that. You just enter in A, B, C, D, whatever. And the same thing, if in some respects you're using percents, then you enter in what percent is an A, B, C, D. So this is probably the best way that we found to use the 4-point scale with Jupyter. And then, of course, the essential part is to set up your scale accordingly. So looking back, again, here's the language you were using for the descriptors for the 4-point scale. The only other thing I forgot to mention is that when we're using standards-based grading, we have to make sure that we always link an assignment to a standard. Jupyter does not allow you to link some assignments to a standard and others not linked. So that's why that other category is really important. I think that's all there is to know about Jupyter setup for standards-based grading and 4-point scale. If you have any questions, though, please reach out. And we're continuing to, explore both of these using Jupyter. This is new territory for all of us. So, if we find another method that works even better, then we'll certainly share that. But please reach out with any questions.